Come closer. You've been feeling it too, haven't you? That faint, unsettling awareness of something unseen. Something that gathers in the corners of your home, just beyond your sight. It whispers from the forgotten spaces, from the neglected things. This isn't just dirt. It's a living archive, a collective breath of everything left behind. And it's growing. Before we dive into the nightmare, do us a favor. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and join us in the shadows. You won't want to miss what happens next. Our story begins with Arthur, a man who understood the terror of neglect better than anyone. He lived by the gospel of cleanliness, a meticulous high priest in a world of accumulating grime. Arthur arrived at the old Blackwood estate, a place forgotten by time, choked by dust. For him, it was a challenge. For us, it was the opening act of a suffocating horror. He stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of decay and disuse. Every surface was cloaked in a velvet layer of forgotten time. It was a sight that would break most people. But for Arthur, it was a battleground, a place where he could fight back against the creeping chaos he so deeply feared. A fight he had been preparing for his entire life. He remembered the toy, a small, worn wooden soldier, lost, buried beneath layers of household grime, his childhood self helpless to save it. That memory was his constant companion. That helplessness had morphed into an obsession, an unyielding need for order, for absolute cleanliness, to control his environment, to banish the unseen anxieties. He began his rituals, every tool in its place, every cloth folded just so, the air filters humming, trying to tame the airborne particles that danced in the weak light. The house groaned around him, old wood settling, drafts whistling through unseen cracks, or so he told himself. The house had its own whispers, its own breath. He started in the library, a room of forgotten stories and even more forgotten dust. He worked with a quiet fury, wiping away years of neglect, revealing the polished wood beneath. Hours passed, the air grew clearer, the surfaces gleamed. He felt a familiar satisfaction, the triumph of order over chaos, but something was wrong. He turned to a table he had just cleaned, polished to a mirror sheen. A thin film of dust had already reformed. Not a lot, but too much, too soon. He frowned, running a gloved finger over the surface. He blamed drafts, the old house's quirks. He blamed himself for not sealing the room properly. Another layer of dust gone. He moved to a different section, a forgotten corner behind a heavy armchair. A thick, undisturbed blanket of dust lay there, untouched for decades. It seemed to hum. Then he heard it, a faint rustling, like dry leaves skittering across a floor, but softer. It came from the dust itself, from that forgotten corner. He froze, listening. The sound was so quiet, so delicate, he almost convinced himself it was nothing. The house settling, his own imagination. But it came again. A dry, papery whisper, a collective sigh from the detritus. It felt deliberate, like something stirring from a long sleep. Arthur slowly approached the armchair, his cleaning cloth held tight, his heart hammered against his ribs. This was not a draft. This was something else. He reached out, about to disturb the ancient dust, but hesitated. A prickle of unease ran down his spine. The dust felt heavy, watchful. He finally wiped a small patch. The rustling stopped. Complete silence. He peered into the disturbed dust, seeing nothing but inert particles. He continued his work, but the incident gnawed at him. He felt an unseen presence, a subtle shift in the house's atmosphere. He was no longer alone. Later, as he cleaned a high-ceiling fan, a gust of air dislodged a cloud of ancient dust. It swirled around him, momentarily blinding him. Within the swirling gray, for a split second, he saw something, a shape, like a distorted face or a grasping hand. It was gone as quickly as it appeared. He blinked, rubbing his eyes. Fatigue, he decided. Long hours, the strain of meticulous work, his mind playing tricks. It had to be. But the image lingered, a phantom echo in his vision. The dust was not just dust. It felt watchful, like a million tiny eyes observing him. He pushed the thought away. He had work to do. He had to maintain control. To let go, even for a moment, was to invite the chaos back in. The next morning, he returned to the library. The air was still. The sun, struggling through grimy windows, cast weak, dusty beams. He checked his work from the previous day. The polished table, the gleaming bookshelves, all seemed well, a small victory. But as he moved closer to a freshly polished desk, his breath caught in his throat. It was there again, dust. Not a film, not a light dusting. This was different, more deliberate. A pattern, an intricate design made of fine gray particles, like a drawing. On a surface he had buffed to perfection just hours before. His mind reeled. No windows or doors had been open. The room was sealed. How could this happen? What was forming these patterns? He leaned in closer, his heart pounding. The pattern looked vaguely familiar, like something from a half-forgotten dream or a nightmare. It was too precise to be random, too intentional. It looked almost like a map or a message. His cleaning tools lay forgotten, his meticulous routine shattered. The dust, his lifelong enemy, was now showing him something. A message from the Pulvis Specter, perhaps, the entity that feeds on neglect, that breathes through forgotten things. Arthur reached out, his hand trembling to touch the dust, to erase the impossible message, to reclaim control. But the dust seemed to pulse, a silent, living thing. And as his fingers neared, the pattern shifted, subtly changing, as if writing itself anew. Arthur's hand froze. The dust pattern on the desk shifted. It wrote itself anew. The dust was alive, watching him. He snatched his hand back. Terror was cold. He tried to wipe it, but hesitated. What if touching it made it worse? He wiped the surface frantically. Dust vanished. But stepping back, a new pattern instantly began to form. It was faster this time, almost instant. A thin, gray outline appeared. His heart hammered in his chest. He felt a subtle pressure, a weight in the air. A presence had entered the room, unseen but profoundly felt. Have you felt that? The air thickens, silence screams. You know you're not alone, even if nothing is there. Arthur moved to a different room, a desperate escape. He cleaned with furious, violent energy, every surface, every corner. But the dust reappeared, relentless. It rose from the wood, from the carpet fibers, faster than ever before. Not just a film, but specific shapes. Vague outlines of faces or symbols coalescing in the grime, a mocking art. He felt eyes upon him, not human, but countless tiny points of awareness. The dust motes, watching his every move. A low hum filled the house, not heard but felt in the bones, a collective murmur growing stronger now. He questioned his sanity. Was he finally breaking? his lifelong fear twisting his mind into these horrors. He blamed stress, isolation, but the events felt too deliberate, too real to be just his mind. On a freshly polished mantelpiece, a small rusted key appeared. Old, forgotten, now prominent on the clean surface. Arthur stared. He had cleaned this spot minutes ago. The key was not there. It surfaced from nowhere. He picked it up, gloved fingers trembling. It felt cold, heavy. Whose key? What did it unlock? Later, on a spotless bedside table, a single dried rose petal lay. Fragile, ancient, a ghost of beauty. He had cleaned this room meticulously. The petal was an impossibility. It seemed placed there, a silent offering. These were not random objects. They felt like echoes, fragments of lives brought forth by the dust. He felt dread. The dust was not just collecting, it was remembering, and now showing them to him. His meticulous control crumbled. The pristine order was invaded, defied by the very thing he fought. He cleaned with desperation, a frantic dance. Every wipe felt futile, a losing battle. The silence was no longer comforting. It was heavy, watchful. Every creak felt like a breath. He saw things in his peripheral vision. Shadows moved too quickly. Dust motes formed fleeting shapes. But when he turned, nothing, only unsettling quiet. His mind played tricks, or was it? What if the tricks were real? What if fear was the only true thing left? This chilled him. He worked through the night, fueled by terror. Sleep was impossible, a surrender to the unseen. He felt a cold breath on his neck. He spun, but the empty hallway offered no explanation. But you've felt that too, haven't you? That shiver when no window is open, no draft near. The feeling of being watched, even in an empty room. A chill not from cold, but something else. Arthur looked into his own eyes in a darkened mirror. Wide, frantic, reflecting terror he couldn't hide. His reflection wavered, blurred by dancing dust. Was it just the glass, or something more sinister? He saw fleeting shapes behind his image. Distorted, human-like forms made of swirling gray particles. He blinked. They were gone, just him, just his fear. But the image lingered, a phantom imprint. His desperate control became desperate understanding. What was happening? What did the dust want? Exhausted, defeated, he stumbled to his temporary bed. He just needed a moment's rest. He pulled back the crisp, clean sheet. His eyes widened, breath caught. Something was there. Something impossibly familiar, yet utterly terrifying, resting on his pristine pillow. An old, grimy teddy bear, his lost childhood toy, the one he could never save. It was perfectly outlined in dust. Its vacant eyes stared up, through the dust, straight into his soul. Arthur stared at the teddy bear on his pillow. His childhood toy, lost for decades, now returned. Its form was perfect, but made entirely of dust. It lay there, a gray, silent echo of his past. The vacant eyes, formed from compacted grime, seemed to look right into him. A cold dread gripped him. This was not a memory. This was real. The dust was marking him, showing him his deepest fear. He reached a trembling, gloved hand towards it. He had to touch it, to prove it was not real, to make it disappear. As his fingers neared, the teddy bear shimmered. With a soft sigh, it collapsed into a pile of fine, inert dust. His breath hitched. It was gone, but the image, the feeling of its dusty weight lingered. The dust was playing games. He began to clean again, a desperate, frantic energy. but the dust felt heavier, more defiant than before. On the library walls, new patterns formed, not just lines but crude shapes, like ancient symbols or forgotten writing. They were intricate, deliberate, too complex to be random. Was the dust trying to communicate? He watched, horrified, as a symbol subtly shifted. A line elongated, a curve deepened. It was alive. He tried to wipe a wall. His cleaning cloth, usually so effective, felt stiff, resistant. It struggled against the grime. He brought his trusty vacuum cleaner to a particularly thick dust accumulation. It roared once, then sputtered and died. He tried another tool, a powerful duster. It felt heavy, almost pushing back. The dust clung, refusing to be moved. The house was fighting him. Every tool, every effort, met with unseen resistance. He was losing control. The air grew thick, heavy. Each breath felt like swallowing fine grit, a subtle pressure on his chest. Despite his constant cleaning, the air never felt truly clean. It was dense, suffocating. He coughed, a dry, rasping sound. His lungs burned. The air itself was becoming an enemy. The rooms felt smaller, tighter. The walls seemed to press in. A creeping claustrophobia took hold. What if the air wasn't just dusty, but filled with the entity? What if he was breathing it in? Desperate for answers, he began searching. He needed to understand what was happening to him, to the house. In a forgotten study, behind a heavy, grimy curtain, he found a small, locked wooden drawer. He used the rusted key he found earlier. The lock clicked open. Inside, a brittle, leather-bound diary lay. It belonged to Alara Vance, a previous resident. Her elegant script filled the fragile pages. He opened it, the old paper crackling like dry leaves. A faint, sweet scent of decay rose from the pages. The first entry he found spoke of the sickness of forgetfulness, a creeping apathy that dulled the mind. Another entry, the dusty presence consumes memories. It feeds on what is lost, on what is ignored. Arthur's blood ran cold. The words echoed his deepest fears. This was not madness. This was real. Ilara wrote of the house changing, of familiar objects shifting, of the dust growing. She described the air growing heavy, the feeling of being watched by unseen particles. Her entries became frantic, her handwriting more erratic. She wrote of being consumed by the forgotten. He felt a profound, chilling connection to her. He was living her nightmare. Her terror was his. Sleep offered no escape. Nightmares of suffocation plagued him. He was buried under layers of dust. He dreamt of being unable to breathe, of fine gray particles filling his mouth, his lungs, his eyes. He woke gasping, drenched in sweat, the phantom dust still in his throat. The horror was relentless. He was certain now. The house was alive, a malevolent entity, breathing, watching, waiting. Faint whispers seemed to drift from the walls, from the very air. Indistinct, collective, unsettling. Was it the house speaking, or the collective consciousness of forgotten things calling to him? He tried to leave the study, to escape the suffocating presence. But the doorway was blocked. A thick, semi-solid barrier of dust had formed in the archway. It pulsed, a gray, moving wall. And from within that shifting, dusty mass, a faint, collective whisper rose, calling his name. Arthur. Arthur stood frozen. The dust barrier pulsed, a living wall. It whispered his name again, clearer this time. A chill, unlike any cold, ran through him. The dusty wall began to flow like thick liquid. It swirled, not like air currents, but with a slow, deliberate motion. A low hum vibrated from within it. He backed away, stumbling. This was not inert grime. This was a living thing, blocking his path, calling his name. He felt a desperate urge to run. As the dust flowed, a small, dark shape emerged within its mass. It was a child's button, old and tarnished, seemingly pulled from forgotten depths. The button, it reminded him of his lost toy buried under dust. The specter was showing him his failures, his deepest fears. It knew him. The dust was not just an archive. It was a predator using his past against him. It had a purpose, a terrible, hungry intent. Within the swirling gray, fragmented images began to appear. Not his own, but fleeting glimpses of forgotten faces, old furniture, a child's lost smile. These were others who had lived and forgotten in this house, their memories, their forgotten lives, now part of the dust. A terrifying collective. The dust now flowed freely across the floor, like a slow, gray river. It climbed the walls, a silent, creeping tide of forgotten things. A faint crack echoed. He looked up. A thin line appeared in the plaster ceiling. Dust, fine and dry, began to trickle down. The cracks spread like veins on old skin. The dust thickened, compacting, pulling the ceiling inward, slowly, inexorably. His pristine order, his sanctuary, was being consumed. The house itself was becoming a victim. He could do nothing to stop it. From the flowing dust, a small antique doll's head emerged. Its painted eyes, now caked in grime, seemed to stare blankly. It was a plaything, once loved, now forgotten. A symbol of neglect, a mirror of his own childhood trauma. The specter knew his wounds. The whispers grew louder, more distinct. A chorus of faint, dry voices speaking in unison yet indistinct. Lost, forgotten, ours. This was the Pulvis Specter, a living archive of neglect, feeding on forgotten existence. It was absorbing everything, becoming everything. His meticulous control was a joke. His phobia, his life's work, was useless. The very air he breathed was the enemy. The rooms felt like tombs. The dust, a suffocating blanket, pressing in from all sides. He felt buried alive, even standing. Was this real? Or was his mind finally breaking under the weight of his lifelong fear? The lines between sanity and madness blurred. A section of the library wall suddenly imploded inward, not with force, but with a silent, hungry collapse. Dust poured in. The dust compacted, forming a dense, gray mass where the wall once stood. It was solid, yet fluid, absorbing the house's structure. He finally understood. The house was not just dusty. It was being eaten, consumed by this entity, turned into forgotten matter. From the new dust mass, a small wooden toy soldier emerged. His toy, the one he lost as a child, it was covered in ancient grime. His breath caught, the toy he couldn't save. It was here. The specter had reached into his deepest, most painful memory. The whispers grew louder, forming coherent words now. You forgot us, now join. To be consumed by the forgotten, to become part of the dust, one more lost memory in its collective, suffocating mass. This was his fate. The dust was no longer just a static presence. It was actively hunting him, drawing him into its suffocating embrace. What would be left of him? Would his memories, his very self, be absorbed, twisted, lost forever within the gray oblivion? His home, once a symbol of control, was now a living tomb. the mundane weaponized against him, the familiar made utterly alien. An antique teacup, a faded ribbon, a child's shoe, all emerged from the flowing dust, silent witnesses to forgotten lives. He clutched his head, the whispers and images overwhelming him. His mind a battlefield, his sanity slipping away. The dust in the center of the room began to coalesce, rising, forming a darker, denser column. It was taking shape. It grew taller, wider, a looming, shadowy form made of pure, compacted oblivion. The air grew cold, heavy with dread. The specter moved, not walking but flowing, gliding across the floor towards him. It was a silent, suffocating wave. As it neared, the whispers became a roar in his mind. Not words, but pure terror. Memories of things he'd never known, yet deeply feared. His toy soldier, lost under the grime. The helplessness, the crushing weight of forgotten things. It was all there, amplified, weaponized. The leading edge of the specter touched his feet. A cold, dry sensation. The dust began to climb, slowly, relentlessly, up his legs. He tried to move, to scream, but his limbs felt heavy, his throat tight. He was being absorbed piece by piece. His vision blurred. The world turned gray. Was this the end? To become one with the forgotten, a silent whisper in the dust. Then, from within the specter, a familiar, empty gaze. His lost teddy bear, made of solid dust, its eyes fixed on him, as the gray oblivion claimed him whole. The gray oblivion was claiming him. His lost teddy bear, made of solid dust, stared with empty eyes from within the specter. Arthur felt the cold, dry dust climbing, consuming. His limbs grew heavy, his breath shallow. He struggled, a desperate, animalistic cry trapped in his throat. With a surge of primal fear, he tore himself free, stumbling backwards. The dust recoiled, then surged again, faster, like a wave. The house was no longer a place of quiet neglect. It was a living, breathing tomb, and he was the prey. The air itself seemed to vibrate with the specter's hunger. It knew his fears, it used his past. The teddy bear, his lost toy, had been a cruel, personal taunt. What else did it know? What else would it show him? He remembered Elara Vance's diary, her frantic words about the sickness of forgetfulness, the dusty presence that consumed memories. He had only skimmed the entries before. Now he needed to understand. He needed to know what he was fighting. This was his only chance. He found it, a hidden entry almost lost in the margins. It spoke of an ancient, extra-dimensional entity. The Pulvis Specter was not just dust. It was a pervasive, environmental anomaly. It literally fed on human inattention, on the physical remnants of forgotten existence. It was a cosmic horror, born of neglect. The house itself was changing. The walls seemed to breathe, the floors groaned with a life not their own. Every surface was a canvas for the specter's slow, suffocating art. The air grew heavier, thicker. Each breath was a struggle, filled with the bitter taste of decay and memory. It was like breathing in the very essence of oblivion. He ran, but where? Every door, every hallway felt like a trap. The dust followed, a silent gray wave, flowing under doors, seeping through cracks. He rounded a corner, desperate for an escape. But there it was, his lost toy soldier, not just an image, but solid, formed from compacted grime. It stood there, a horrifying, grimy sentinel. Its tiny, dust-caked eyes seemed to follow him. The Spectre was weaponizing his childhood trauma against him. This was his ultimate nightmare. The toy he couldn't save, now a monstrous guardian blocking his path, a physical manifestation of his failure. He had to fight. He grabbed a heavy-duty vacuum cleaner, his last weapon against the encroaching tide of oblivion. He powered it on. The roar was deafening, a defiant challenge. He aimed the nozzle at the flowing dust, at the toy soldier. But the dust didn't just vanish. It seemed to absorb the suction, to grow denser, more solid. The vacuum whined, then choked, its bag bulging with the impossible weight. The toy soldier stood firm, untouched. The Spectre had consumed his attempt at defiance. Water, that was it. Water could bind the dust, turn it to mud, make it inert. He ran to the kitchen, grabbing a bucket, filling it with frantic haste. He splashed the water at the advancing dust. It hissed, evaporated instantly, leaving behind dry, clean patches. The dust remained, flowing around the wet spots. The Spectre defied physics. It was not just dust. It was something else, something ancient, something beyond his understanding. Fire, the ultimate cleanser. He grabbed a can of lighter fluid, his hands shaking. A desperate final gamble. He sprayed the fluid, a thin line across the floor, then ignited it. A whoosh of flame. For a moment, hope flared. The dust hissed, recoiled from the flames, but it didn't burn. It compacted, became denser, forming a solid wall against the heat. The fire flickered, then died out, starved of oxygen. The Spectre was not defeated. It was growing. Each failed attempt, each desperate act only seemed to feed it, to make it larger, more menacing. The air was now a suffocating shroud. Each breath was shallow, painful. His lungs burned. He felt lightheaded, dizzy. He could taste it now, the bitter tang of forgotten things. Each inhale brought fragmented memories, not his own, but echoes of countless lost lives. A child's laughter, a woman's sigh, the rustle of old paper. All these forgotten moments, now swirling within him, poisoning his mind. The house was shrinking. The walls were closer, the ceiling lower. The Spectre was transforming his world into a claustrophobic living tomb. He was trapped, cornered. The dust had flowed into every room, every corner, leaving no safe haven. The Spectre loomed before him, a vast, suffocating presence. It wasn't a solid shape, but a shifting, churning mass of oblivion. And from within its depths, again, the teddy bear, his lost toy, its vacant, dust-caked eyes fixed on him, a silent accusation. Beside it, the toy soldier, a grim, grimy guardian. The Spectre was showing him his past, his failures, weaponized against him. Then the whispers began, not faint now, but a chorus. 1,000 dry voices rising from the dust, from the very air. They spoke in unison, yet each voice was distinct. A collective consciousness of forgotten existence, and they spoke to him, calling his name. Arthur, they breathed. His name, drawn out, stretched, echoing from the depths of oblivion. Your consciousness will become another fragment, the whispers promised, another memory, lost, absorbed into us. His mind, his very self, would be devoured, twisted, lost forever within the Spectre's endless, dusty mass. The ultimate horror for a man obsessed with control. The weight of oblivion pressed down on him. The air was gone, only dust, only forgotten things, only the Spectre. He gasped, a dry, rattling sound. His eyes, fixed on the looming, suffocating presence. and within it, the empty, knowing gaze of his lost teddy bear welcoming him to the dust. Arthur, overwhelmed, understood the specter fed on neglect. He had to find a way to truly see it, to deny its sustenance. His mind raced, a final desperate struggle. He remembered Elara Vance's words. It feeds on what is lost, on what is ignored. The specter thrives on inattention. What if he paid it absolute, relentless attention? To truly see every particle, every fragment of forgotten existence within its vast, gray mass. To acknowledge its terrible, suffocating presence. Could that be its weakness? The idea was horrifying. To embrace the very thing he had spent his life battling. To willingly immerse himself in the oblivion he so deeply feared. But there was no other way. His cleaning tools had failed. Fire and water were useless. Only a change in perception, a mental weapon, remained. He closed his eyes, then opened them not to clean but to observe. To acknowledge the dust, not as inert grime, but as a living, breathing entity. The room pulsed. The air, already thick, seemed to solidify, pressing in. The specter reacted to his focused, unwavering attention. It did not like being seen. Fragmented memories assaulted him. Not just images, but raw emotions. A child's forgotten joy, an old man's silent grief, a woman's faded hope. They swirled around him, a maelstrom of collective consciousness. He felt the crushing weight of countless forgotten lives, all absorbed into the specter. His mind screamed, overwhelmed, but he held fast, forcing himself to witness it all, to remember, to acknowledge, to refuse to neglect even a single fragment. The specter recoiled subtly. Its form wavered, as if his absolute attention was a poison. It had never been truly seen before, only ignored, cleaned, forgotten. But the entity fought back, intensifying the sensory overload. The whispers became a deafening roar of forgotten names, lost places, unfulfilled dreams. The air grew impossibly heavy, suffocating. He felt himself being pulled, drawn into the gray maw. His own memories began to fray like old threads. He saw his childhood toy, the wooden soldier, not as a taunt, but as a part of the specter's vast, sad collection. He saw it, truly saw it, for the first time. And his teddy bear, its empty eyes not menacing but mournful. Another forgotten fragment, yearning for acknowledgement, for a final, true glance. He realized the specter didn't just feed on neglect. It was neglect. A collective wound of all that was ignored, craving to be remembered, even if only in its own terrible way. His final choice. He would not fight it with tools or fire. He would fight it with his mind, with his very being. He would give it the ultimate attention. He would sacrifice his own memory, his own clean, orderly mind, not to be consumed by it, but to become a conscious part of it. To remember from within. To become a living archive within the archive of the forgotten. To deny it the oblivion it craved, by becoming the very thing that remembers. He opened his mind not to resist, but to absorb, to let the flood of forgotten memories wash over him, to embrace the collective unconscious. The house screamed, not wood and plaster, but the collective voice of the specter, a furious, desperate shriek. It recoiled from his conscious surrender. He felt himself dissolving, his individual consciousness merging with the vast gray sea. But he held on to one thought, I remember, I see you, The specter thrashed, a monstrous entity caught in its own trap. His intentional attention was a burden, a poison to its nature. The house shuddered, groaned, then began to crumble, not into dust, but into an unnatural, absolute cleanliness. A stark, sterile void. The dust retreated, not vanquished, but absorbed, transformed. The house became an empty shell, unnaturally pristine, almost surgical in its lack of life. No speck of dust remained, no forgotten object, no memory, just a chilling, absolute void where life once was, a perfect, terrifying cleanliness. And Arthur, was he consumed? Was he a new fragment, forever remembering within the specter's vast, gray consciousness? Or did a part of him escape, irrevocably scarred, carrying the silent, terrible knowledge of the Pulvis Specter's true nature? The world outside, was it truly safe, or was the specter everywhere, waiting, feeding on the neglect in every forgotten corner? What about your own home, those dusty shelves, that forgotten box in the attic, the lint under your bed? Do you truly see it? Or do you ignore it, letting it gather, letting it grow, letting it remember? The Pulvis Specter is patient. It is always there, in every forgotten nook, every uncleaned surface. It waits for your inattention. It yearns for your neglect. It hungers for your forgotten memories. And when it has gathered enough, when it has remembered enough, it will come for you, not with a roar, but with a whisper. A soft, dry rustle that will fill your home, your mind, your very lungs. And you will become another fragment, another lost memory in its vast, suffocating archive. So next time you see a speck of dust, don't just ignore it. Don't just wipe it away. Look closely, acknowledge it, see it for what it truly is. A tiny, waiting piece of oblivion. Because if you don't, who will remember you when you become one with the forgotten? And as you breathe in the air tonight, what forgotten whispers might you be drawing into your very soul?